Welcome to Together, a higher ed podcast where we bring you stories, insights, and experiences from voices across the higher education sector. I'm Chase Haygood, the Vice Provost for Student Success at the University of Utah. Today, I'm thrilled to be joined by Jim Agutter, the Senior Associate Dean for Academic Innovation and Faculty Success at the University of Utah. Welcome to the podcast, Jim.
Great. Thanks, Chase. Great to see you, and thanks for the invite, and I look forward to chatting with you.
Well, we really are glad that you're here. Folks may or may not believe it, but, it's like, can we coerce Jim? Can we invite Jim? Can we say, Jim, just come over here in the studio for a second and this will be painless? And you agreed.
I know, but I thought I was actually like coercing you and paying you on the side some money. Like, please, Chase, please let me talk about this work.
Well, it's important work. How about that?
Thanks.
And we're happy to highlight it. Just really, really incredible things. Jim, we've known each other since I arrived. You've been at the University of Utah for a minute.
Hot minute, yeah.
I'd love us to get started with you sharing a little bit about your journey in higher education, how you came into this current role, as well as like how you arrived at the University of Utah. Like, what has a bit of that story been for you? Because I think part of the reason for the question is I think there's a lot of power in those stories, right? So how'd you get in, how'd you make your way into higher ed?
Well, I was born. Now, we can fast forward a little bit from that.
A little bit of David Copperfield there.
Yeah,
it was the best of times. It was or I began my life at the beginning of my life.
Exactly. Very impactful time. How did I end up here? I grew up in Salt Lake. Went to East High School, and I must
Go
admit,
East.
Yes, go Leopards.
All right.
I was a horrible student, and really didn't do well at all. Didn't think higher education was even in my future, other than my parents had gone to school. And so I found myself barely graduating from high school, looking around and just attending college because it was what my friends were doing and what my parents expected me to, with really no direction whatsoever. Took a few courses and would take time off in between semesters and just really didn't know what I was going to do until I went to one particular class. And I was the only person that showed up. The class was the future of architecture, and since I was the only one that showed up, my professor's like, do you want to do research? I had no idea what that meant. So I got a Europe grant for a couple $1,000s for a semester, and my professor just kind of gave me some ideas about what the future of architecture was going to be. It was back in the 90s when cyberspace and all sorts of digital architectures were happening. And I became just so turned on by the fact that I could do intellectual inquiry. I didn't even really know what that is, but given free rein to think about stuff and think about the future. And then I subsequently just kept taking more and more architecture classes, taking more classes from this individual. We ended up getting grants and working together, and then sort of stumbled into kind of almost 30-year time here at the university, just hanging out and being around really smart, motivated, interesting people.
Jim, I think that is one of the most remarkable, the trajectory of that, if we can unpack it for a second. So grew up in Salt Lake, great city, different certainly than it is now. So I'd welcome any comments on that or the change that you've seen at the University of Utah as well. I mean, that's having been here as an undergrad and then seeing it from the perspective not only of a student, but of a faculty member and of a student doing research, and then as a faculty member engaged in research and in teaching and in service. There's a lot there. There's a lot kind of, tangled up in all of that. I think, tell me if I got it right, the ability, can you imagine a world or a moment or your own life, I guess the world from your perspective, but your own life, had you not gone to that class and been the only student present?
Yeah, I have no idea. I guess the biggest thing for me is I always associated going to school with then having some sort of job. Mm-hmm. And I never thought that I thought you had to have a destination in mind.
Yeah.
And so I was always kind of searching for some sort of destination rather than being engaged in the process of just letting it unfold and sort of letting it take me where I wanted to go. And so, I have no idea what would have happened. I would have done something, of course.
Sure.
But the thing that was the most amazing thing is all of a sudden I had freedom and I had confidence and I had support. And I felt like in high school and other places, there was really none of that, in the sense that I was going through a bureaucratic system that had me doing certain things that I found quite frankly irrelevant to my own personal experience in my life.
Right.
And they seemed relatively not easy. I mean, I struggled, but I just didn't see the point of it all.
Yeah.
And in this case, I was given a lot of freedom to explore with sort of nudging and guidance and not dictating that I had to do anything in particular. And it just like captured my attention and energy, and I sort of like, wow, I can actually do this. This is pretty amazing. And I get paid probably more than I had ever gotten paid ever in my life.
Yeah.
So it just kind of kept going, and then building more and more confidence, meeting more and more people that were kind of interested in the same topic was really magical.
So then fast forward, you're a student at the U, and then you work on your master's.
Mm-hmm.
You become a faculty member at the U. And then at some point, help me, and viewers and listeners know, you come over to undergraduate studies. Is Martha Bradley Evans, the senior associate VP and dean at the time?
Yes. So she was a professor in the architecture program.
Mm-hmm.
I started working with her in about 2008 when I was coming back from starting a company and being a research professor, and then having a position in the architecture school. And so there was a proposal to put together a course in honors where she was the dean there at that particular time. Mm-hmm. And I missed a deadline, and she stopped me in the hallway and it's like, well, I didn't see your proposal, which was kind of another sort of one of these moments of like having some accountability and someone probably knowing something that was more about me than I knew for myself. Sure. And more confidence and wanting something from me. And so I quickly put together something, submitted it. I met with John Francis and Martha Bradley at that point, and they approved it. And it was really a project of empathetic innovation in healthcare. And it was working with students for a year, examining issues in the hospital environment where we had done a lot of technology development. So that was kind of the start, and I did that for 3 years, teaching a variety of different topics in honors, and then started a design program in the College of Architecture and Planning, multidisciplinary design, and then kind of worked on that, and then in 2016 moved out of that position, took a sabbatical, and then Martha hired me in undergraduate studies, and been here ever since.
So I'm going to say this and not necessarily kind of get it out of the way, but I want to say it and kind of orient. So by the time that I arrived in the summer of 2021, I mean, the university, like all universities, all of our society, the whole planet's lived through, those of us that are still around have lived through COVID, lived through the pandemic. I get to the University of Utah, and my lead-up conversations with Martha and with then Provost Dan Reed, who you also spent some time as a faculty fellow with Dan, I think. Mm-hmm. That's right. One of the initial comments, I was like, you were trying to orient, like, okay, what are all the various moving parts, and how, certainly Martha had designed undergraduate studies in a particular kind of way that worked really, really well, saw incredible outcomes. One of the conversations early on that I had with Martha was like, okay, who are the various folks that I can partner with early on and they can help me get an inside view of how this university is put together, how it works, what its strengths are, its weaknesses, its opportunities. And Martha said, Jim Agutter.
No, it's nice.
And I don't know if I've ever shared that with you. But,
No.
See, this is another reason to come on. Here's another reason to come on. You know,
right. Get some good validation.
Right. And not only was Martha right, I think one of the greatest privileges of my career is knowing you.
Yeah, that's way too kind, but
well,
I appreciate it.
Here's why. So get comfortable. I have watched you on multiple occasions, Jim, and we're going to talk about a couple of those of just programs and initiatives. Think about, there's a lot about in terms of organizational theory, as you know, and as others who are listening or watching will know, but the way that we kind of come at a challenge or an opportunity, it really does depend on, much of it in terms of solution depends on like how you build, how you conceptualize or frame up what the challenge is, right? And on project after project after project, watching you tackle with, and I love the way that you describe and the project that you led around empathy within a hospital or clinic or healthcare setting, taking that same kind of approach to leadership and design, to be willing to listen to folks, right?
I should come on this podcast more often if you say such nice things.
It's
Thanks.
like, what are you doing next week, Chase?
Right, exactly. I'm coming back in.
I love it. I've had a front row seat to it, Jim, and I've learned a lot from observing your approach to it. And I think, tell me what you think of this. Let me frame it up in as a kind of thought or a question. And it has to do with leadership, and then I want to talk more about kind of impact and challenges and the kind of innovation ecosystem that you see in front of us now, particularly in undergraduate education. But here's a prompt to kind of get us there, and that is, too often, it seems to me, tell me you agree, disagree, or take it in whatever direction you want, it seems as though that like leading with empathy as a core value, the kind of human-centered approach to it, which I see from you on a regular basis. I aspire to do as much. But that there are certain folks that might see that as a weakness, or that it slows down the innovation cycle. It strikes me that isn't part of who you are or your belief. But could you speak to that? Because there's some kind of cost benefit analysis going on in there somewhere, right? For the folks who would say, "Oh, you're listening to too many people," or we've just got to move on this right now. What are your thoughts about it, Jim?
Yeah, the bit that I learned very early on that I mentioned was, rather than being focused on the destination, being focused on the process. Going through design school and architecture school and sort of realizing that wasn't the direction that I wanted to go in practicing architecture. But the thing that I learned was, if I focused too much on the destination drove the decisions that I was making. And therefore, then I'm trying to optimize, I'm trying to shortcut, I'm trying to exclude, whatever, because I'm desperate to get to a destination that I've already predetermined. And going through design school really allowed me to think about the process and the unfolding. And so it's like, I don't really know of where this is going. And so as a result of that, then it's a step by step and going through the steps that are required in order for something to unfold. And sometimes it's efficient, sometimes it's not, sometimes it is really messy and dirty, and sometimes it's really clean. But I think through that, then you get to a point where the end result just emerges in whatever its natural state is in the context that it's existing in. By focusing so much on the destination, you just sort of shoehorn something in and not take in, various opinions or whatever it is. And this other just like, I don't know, let's just let it go where it needs to go. And not that it's just chaos, but it's a different focus, and it allows for a lot of opportunity for things to change. And then the other part that I see is really censoring the world, not like censoring, stopping, excluding, but putting feedback mechanisms out all the time. And sort of where you're listening, you're hearing, you're seeing, you're feeling, all of that as you go through a process to look for stronger patterns and acceptance. And you just kind of flow that particular way rather than force it.
Yeah. So in that, what I hear you describing as well, maybe some of the on those binaries, it may be fast, it may be slow. I was in a conversation earlier today, and I wonder what you think of like the concept between, or the differences perhaps between, and there's a literature base behind it, but the differences then between like change management versus change leadership, right? What you've just described and the processes kind of that design. In my view, having watched you work and try to adopt some of that from you and from my own experience and background, kind of see those begin to, right? If you're willing as a leader, it seems like you're willing to learn from the people around you, right? The experts and the folks who've had different experiences and successes than you have and failures, that you would say, okay, if we've got considerable change in front of us, which we do, we'll talk more about kind of state of variety of things in a moment, that the ability to listen to folks, to lead, listen to learn, listen to, actually hear a person, as I heard you just describe it now. Not that it's okay. It's the perfunctory. I've done my listening. Now we will get to the end destination that I had in mind. I mean, it just seems far more solutions oriented. I might say organic, but responsive, right, to any number of variables that, with a predetermined path and destination in mind, it's, to hear you describe it, it seems as though it isn't taking into account all the variables that could change on you, right out of the gate. You think you're headed over here to solve this problem, and now a pandemic hits, a budget crisis, global politics erupt. I mean, all of these things spanning curriculum and faculty retention and you name it, right? International recruitment, whatever. There's a responsiveness there. I mean, do you think that comes from, where do you think that comes for you? Like, where does it originate? I mean, is that for part of training, part of experience, part of just your worldview and how you view the world?
Kind of a combo. I mean, it was certainly reinforced through architecture school, but I think I had an inclination to that anyway. So when I graduated high school, barely graduated high school, I drove across the country with my mom to go visit family, and we were having a family reunion. We got to Boston. I had been bicycling and other stuff, and I had seen some people along the way, primarily in Yellowstone, and I was like, that looks pretty fun. They were just biking. So I told my mom, she was very upset, and it's just like, I just want to bike across the country. 18, I probably looked like I was 12, and she was absolutely terrified. But, to her credit, she's like, okay, let's go get stuff for you to do that. And I remember the first day I just took off. I had an old paper map, had no idea. I knew I was heading to Texas because that's where some family ultimately get to Utah. And so I just took off with this paper map and rode. I had never ridden farther than 40 miles in my life, got 70 miles, got to a stop sign and just fell over because I was cramping and couldn't move at all. Slept under a tree at a university, just sort of trying to get going. But I think in tying to what I've always been, just like, let me do something. I learn by doing. I am not a traditional academic, I think, but for me, it's much more a process of doing and just trying something and failing horribly. And I'm a relatively quick learner at most things. And I think it's by listening and sort of intuiting what's going on. And so as we go back to the bike ride, I quickly got up to speed where I could ride, 70, 80, 90 miles a day. I understood how to navigate, and I was able to do it relatively easily.
Yeah.
And so I think the same thing. So I'm perhaps wired to just do stuff, look at what's going on and be responsive to the world and let
Yeah.
it tell me what it wants to do. And I'll just like, oh, okay. And I don't really have much destination in mind. It's just like, okay, let's just try it, let it emerge, and it'll tell me which way to go. And I've done that with my career, done that with relationships, all sorts of things. And it's worked out relatively well.
Well, I just want to say again, I'm in awe of that approach. Like, I don't know, I don't know if I'm a type A or what kind of, or on ideogram or whatever the stuff is these days. Like where, like, for many of us, I will just say, for any of the folks watching or listening, it's kind of like, there's a lot of hard work for a lot of folks to get into that space. And I am in awe of somebody who that's how you see the world.
Right.
I
Well,
mean,
and likewise for me, the other folks who are much more organized and systematic and driven towards one destination, that's always like, how do you do that? Like, I want to go some other direction.
well, speaking of another direction, well, first of all, you still cycle. Yeah.
Yep.
I mean,
Yep.
what does it look like these days?
Try to cycle at least 5 or 6 times a week. And the last few years a friend and I have been doing these 200-mile gravel races in Kansas every year, an Unbound race. And then there's another couple that we'll do. So it's like my happy place.
Yeah.
Everyone has a spot where they feel totally relaxed. It's like going home. It's like putting on a old pair of shoes, and it's like I know this position super well. I always tell my wife, and I watch a bunch of cycling, that I will sleep and I dream of bicycling. And even watching TV, I get emotion of like, back and forth and back and forth. And it just feels really comfortable. So yeah, I love it.
That's awesome. So I want to ask you a little bit about, we could talk about the exceptional patient experience. We could talk about the exceptional educational experience. We could talk about the ongoing work of Navigate U and tracking and developing out, I like to say kind of architecting, right? Designing out, understanding the student journey at the University of Utah. We talk about any number of those things. I think where I'd like us to start is as any of those projects, including the Academic Innovation and Intelligence Lab, when I watch you do your work, and I know others throughout the university and then others as we've joined the Innovation Alliance, it's the approach that you bring to the work, Jim, as a designer. Okay, so here's a scenario. Let's say you and I are going to have a one-on-one, which we do every week. And I say, and everybody now is kind of like, this man has to put up with this conversation every week. So you got a lot of sympathizers and empathizers out there, Jim.
It's not that bad.
So part of it, like, okay, if this is a challenge, right? Let's say we're trying to understand, really where some of the pitfalls and some of the barriers are for students at the University of Utah, right? I imagine, tell me if this is right, or take us down a path of where your mind immediately goes, right? So having worked through the exception with U of U Health, with the exceptional patient kind of framework, and then having worked through both learning framework and early days learning framework and the exceptional educational experience, is there ever a moment where you can like, oh, here is yet another new person who I've got to train and help them see where the whole thing fits together? Or is it, okay, a new perspective, or is it somewhere in between?
No, I think everything's an evolution.
Yeah.
And whomever comes in has their own perspective and their own view. So yeah, it's like, what a wonderful opportunity to tell another story. And again, being trained in design and sort of listening and being responsive, it's another time for me to hone what I'm thinking about. And so every time it's like, oh, that's really not what this is about. This is it. And what's really been amazing over the last number of years with you coming here and really leading out on a lot of this work is the level of sophistication that we're able to bring to this work, and really institutional change is so much greater than it has been. One, because we kind of know what we're doing. Two, there's much more systematic focus on student success. Back in the old days, we really didn't care. And students were kind of byproducts of stuff that, they happened to come along with us. And there were, there were many people that had different views of that. But as organizations, we weren't really good at listening to students and designing things that supported them in really deep, meaningful ways. And so this evolution of that, and now we're at places where, again, students are now very important to what we do. We see the focus being around how do we get them through with us and on to bigger and better things in their lives. And so that's the second thing. And I think the third is we just have so much more sophisticated tools to look at things. Before we really were a paper survey or something, and our N of students was about 10, and now we can look at 10,000 if we have the appropriate measures and things. So I just think we're in a great spot. So I see it always as evolving, and it's wonderful to have new perspectives and new insight, new energy, new ways of framing it and directions. It's just we just keep trucking along.
Can you talk a little bit about? I appreciate that, and can you talk a little bit about the pace of that innovation from your perspective, like that innovation curve or that kind of step level that you've seen since being inside undergraduate studies and having, yourself led out on not only the adoption, but then the iteration of a variety of different approaches and the refinement, right, of, the learning framework and the exceptional educational experience come to mind. I remember a conversation that you and I were in with a couple of other folks, and it's like, are these two in some ways interlocking with each other? And if we tighten the bolts down a little and say like these two are in fact reinforcing, and then we bring in Navigate U as an overlay for the kind of strategy set. From your perspective, what's been the most exciting thing, the most challenging thing, the most because I think from the outside folks might be like, oh, well, they did this and then they did this and and it looks far more seamless. When we chat with folks inside the Innovation Alliance or in other places, people are like, oh, wow, well, you all just set a course and you just did X, Y, and Z. And then it's like, no, well, I know that that's not the case. Can you speak to it? For the things that perhaps are most exciting and most challenging.
Yeah, it's messy, no doubt about it. But doing anything should be messy. And again, you should learn as you go, and that learning then informs your next move, your next initiative, whatever. And so hopefully, again, if you're focusing on student outcomes and reducing barriers for them to move through the institution quickly and getting on with their other aspirations in life, the direction shouldn't change significantly. And so while we can have different initiatives, the initiatives are always, should be, as in your terms, interlocking, because they're getting to the same goal. We just now have different foci, different data, different other sort of things that we're doing, but it's always in this one area. I think the biggest challenges right now, which are the biggest opportunities, is the speed of change. And at the same time recognizing we exist in an organization and a structure that has, right or wrong, but has a deep history in very methodical, slow changing. Higher ed has not been really changing its overall approach for a long time, which is both really wonderful and often maddening. And it's like, well, we should be doing something different. But there is great importance in keeping those traditions, honoring input, getting, a variety of folks to buy into it at the same time of like, okay, we need to change it now. So there's immense opportunities because we have tools, strategies, data, people that are so much more sophisticated than we've ever had. And then we have the really wonderful, slow historical process. And so, yeah, those are both like, how do you move those along so you don't break and disrupt horribly the systems that are in place? So, yeah.
So, hearing you describe it, Jim, and tell me if this works. So many years ago, this was after Lori and I got married. We were living in South Georgia. It was my first faculty post. And we were at a time in life where it's kind of like, well, let's do something really fun. And we didn't have a kid. We didn't know anybody in the area. So there was, and the name, it's going to escape me. It's not Bing Crosby. Fred Astaire.
Close.
Fred Astaire dance classes.
Wow.
This is all going to come around,
I love
Jim.
this. I want to see video.
Yeah.
That would be like VHS.
Yeah, no doubt. So we are taking, I think it was a continuing ed program at a local community college. We did dance classes. And I think we learned a couple of different dances, and it was great. We were the youngest people in the room by far. We had a great time. Dance instructor was great. Favorite dance was in 3/4, the waltz. And there was something about it that the timing just felt right. The movement felt right. And as I hear you describe in my mind, immediately an image of that comes into focus, because what you're describing is this balance between leading through change while maintaining the qualities and the structures of the past that delivered us to the present, that if we leverage them in the right kind of way, if you can kind of get in sync with 3/4 time, which is not the easiest thing to do, then you can waltz. If you can't, if you refuse to kind of like let go of a basic common 4/4 time, then you're going to struggle.
Right. No, I love it. And I think it is that interesting dance and the timing and other stuff. So for me, I live in this weird world of my wife and I collect a lot of old furniture and a variety. We've rebuilt many really old houses and have a deep, deep appreciation for the value of something old and cars and a variety of things.
Yeah.
But at the same time, this really drive towards some sort of alternative future and seeing all of this tech and gadgety sort of stuff and being an early adopter. And it is somewhat of a deep appreciation of both of those existing at the same time.
Yeah.
And what is the value of this, the old, that is really deep and meaningful and that grounds us? And what is the value of this thing that's really exciting and new and futuristic and exploratory here? And where do we kind of move between the two in some sort of rhythm and 3/4 time, as you're describing?
Yeah, locating the synergy right between them to say that they can, if you get it right, they can reinforce each other. Yep. Right. So can you talk a little bit about, really great segue, can you talk a little bit about where we were just in a meeting together. So what's interesting to me is like the conversation around artificial intelligence, which is not new, but has become far more kind of AI in its ubiquitousness, just permeating even more in a more obvious kind of conscious way all of our lives. How we're leveraging it at the University of Utah. I mean, you're in the thick of it, Jim. So where, wild conceptual kind of hairs kind of take us down a path of like, well, if we could do this, this, and this, and then you and teams of folks come back with, here's where we are.
Yeah.
Between that, in terms of artificial intelligence and even the academic kind of innovation and intelligence lab.
Sure. I mean, the one thing that's really interesting to me that we've had conversations with different departments and helping them think through programs and how they deal with AI is that there is a fear from many, and maybe rightfully grounded fear that AI is going to change their practice of teaching. And some of these discussions are around like, well, if AI can teach basic biology and other things, and like, what's my role? And it's really fascinating to me, again, in this 3/4 rhythm, old and new sort of thing. It's like, well, what is it to be a human? Like the routine activities that we do to disseminate information, it's communication. Is that deeply human, where you're going through a series of facts and that you're teaching someone to learn those facts and then apply them in some other way? I would question, in the world when we have additional tools, if that's deeply human. And then, so what is it to be in these departments and teach this sort of stuff? I think to me, it's an unbelievably wonderful opportunity to rethink what we do in higher ed. Where is the real value? What are the outcomes that we want for students? I don't think in many cases, many people want, like, okay, well, they know all the facts. And it's like, okay, well, that's a part of it.
Yeah.
But really, we're trying to get at something much deeper and richer. And that's where intelligence and excitement comes, and confidence for students.
Yeah.
So then how do we navigate that? And then how do we build AI tools that are responsible and do what they do really well to support human activity? I think you made some comment before, and I know it's kind of emerging, of AI and HCI and a variety, like, how do we tie artificial intelligence with human intelligence or human desires or whatever it is? We're in that. And I think I find it so fascinating, existing in these both worlds where you're figuring out the time so they work and they amplify each other. So in all the work we're doing in the Intelligent Lab is really thinking through very deeply about what are tasks and other areas that can support human work and amplify it. So can we build some systems that allow for, at scale across the entire institution, with millions of observations, qualitative assessment for student course feedback? We know that humans can't do that very well. They have to read every word. They then look at these isolated bits and pieces of data and they integrate it. And we can do that at scale and with pretty good accuracy, and show that to a student or a faculty member of what's going on across their course, their career, their courses they teach.
Yep.
Which is not to say they're not important. It's just we can do this at a different scale than you can in a different speed.
Yep.
Because our brains aren't wired that way. Like what eventually gets associated and clumped together and clustered.
Yep.
But we can do that up front for you to help that and amplify your understanding.
Yeah. All the while respecting data security, putting, in that space. I think it's worth saying, putting in check the kind of human bias, not to say that generative AI and others might not have bias if untrained or trained against it, but putting in check biases that we all hope could be put in place to have more of an objective kind of view of the impact of teaching and learning or of human interactions. And the like.
Yeah, and thinking about then again this goal of being student-centered, or let's say end user. So end user is a word that we use in product design, of the person at the end of an interface, looking at a computer screen. It's like, what are the jobs that they need to do?
Yeah.
And how can we help facilitate those jobs in a responsible, honorable, secure way that then at the end of the day, they're just like, wow, that just really extended my work. So another project that we've been working on is a AI tutor bot, which is really interesting, where it's embedded in Canvas, and there are many of these. and it's trained on the faculty member's course, and the faculty member can upload documents to help train it. It could be the syllabus, it could be books, it could be articles, presentations, whatever they see is relevant to the course. But then we've also built in, knowing that faculty want the usage of those topics in certain ways. So we built in a really simple way that the faculty member can tell the AI system what to do with the material. It's like, oh, I really want to focus on the overview of this presentation. So then they have the ability to train the bot in real time and update it so that then the responsiveness for the students when they use it is really reflective of what the faculty members' goals are. The really exciting piece that we're doing now is taking all of the passive data that happens, that's captured from the students working on this, asking questions, and then passing that back to a faculty member and saying, here's what's going on in the class. Here's what students are asking. So it tries again to get at these places where we don't have good intelligence, we don't have good data that actually make me a better instructor on how to teach, what concepts students are struggling with, and ultimately to do my job better.
Yeah.
And I think that's in all of those particular cases where we really try to understand that piece and then use technology to facilitate it.
What I've seen about the work, and I appreciate the description just now, and as I was listening to you, it's almost as if locating kind of the spaces where we haven't been able to listen, like in the process of learning, right? And like the bookcases are groaning under the research on, what does it take to learn, stickiness of learning, all that stuff. Locating spaces where we as faculty have not been able to locate where a student might, in almost near real time, I'll describe it, near real time, where do they lock up, on the formula? Where do they not necessarily understand the concept that they're reading? Where is it that, and in that moment of struggle, being able to then extract that in a way that the faculty, the instructor, is able to say, that's not where I anticipated they would hit a wall. But talk about how useful that is in the learning process to know if I was able to deploy an additional resource to bring about clarity, to unlock, not only understanding that concept and principle, but the kind of multiplier effect where creativity and curiosity can begin to thrive. Because again, in a dance of like the way in which faculty have approached teaching and learning, and often it's through what has been done to us, which we naturally want to then replicate. Because if it worked on me, then, and sometimes perhaps baking in that did not work on me, so I'm never going to do that to a student. But then in that balance, then taking that and then, I don't know, I've heard you describe it, and certainly Ann Cook and others, like a willingness to explore. Could teaching be better? Or answering, I think, from the very earliest days that we started working together, what does it take to answer the question or begin going down a path of answering the question, well, what really is good teaching?
Right. Yeah, I mean, I couldn't think of any faculty member that I've met, with the exception of just a few, want to be a better teacher.
Yeah.
You spend your time, you have a passion, you want to communicate that passion to another individual. There is a natural inclination to hone that craft. And so I think where there's difficulty is that people don't know what to do. Most academicians have not been trained at teaching. We kind of do as has been done to us, or not, because it was really bad.
Yep.
And some do a little professional development, some do a lot, but the nature of that, I don't think there's not a desire. Mm-hmm. There's just a way of doing it and engaging it. And, again, from my own view and how that happens, which I think we're trying to think about differently in the lab, is more often than not, it's another initiative. It's another layer on top of something. It's something I have to engage in deeply. And I have to commit my time, which is different than, and it's sort of outside of other stuff that I'm naturally doing. And I think with some technologies and some other tools and being very clever, we can actually embed that work in faculty development and teaching excellence in kind of the process of teaching, so that it's just in time learning.
Yep.
You're using nudging and other stuff. So it's not, again, another thing that I have to go and attend and sit through a workshop and
Right.
do the traditional thing. It's just kind of filtered in and embedded and maybe peppered in at strategic locations when it matters. So that's why I think that bot and the feedback is really impactful.
Yeah.
And it's just like, oh, wow, I had a inkling that was maybe an issue, but wow, this really confirms that.
Right.
Huh, interesting. Then in our, we have another tool that's looking, I mentioned, that's a qualitative assessment of student course feedback. Within that broader tool set is a way to identify a particular area that could use improvement, where students are saying that there might be some issues. I always have a group work issue. Students don't like to do group work. Fair enough. I hated it too, but I inflict them on it. Yeah. We have the ability to identify that insight and then find resources that can help that faculty member sort of just as they're reviewing.
Yeah.
It could be a video, it could be an article, whatever, and we present it in a way so that there's sort of a level of engagement. Like, here's just a little podcast, here's a little quote, here's an article, here's a video.
Yep.
So that they can, it's available, they can choose what they want rather than it being some new thing that they have to engage in. It's just sort of in the process. And we're really trying to refine more of that, where we're just peppering in little bits and pieces of info. Can I talk about,
Please,
learning outcomes assessment? We have a new project that we're just starting that is really exciting. So oftentimes when individuals submit programs or have new or need to do updates to their degrees, they'll do some sort of outcome assessment plan, and where they have specific learning outcomes. What we've known, most faculty don't know really in depth as much as the experts do what that involves and what are good and bad practices. They just, it's not their world. They're teaching, they're doing their research, their service, they're not assessment experts.
Yep.
And so we kind of looked at how that's all been working and figured using some technology and perhaps an assessment portal that we could actually walk someone through the process of doing an assessment plan that's based on best practices, that then educates them along the way and basically asks them a series of questions that are highly structured, but using AI can be sort of deviations from a particular structure. And it just is marvelous at, like, well, have you thought about this? Oh, well, if you're doing a quiz, that is a direct assessment. Is there another way that you can do it? Have you thought about that? It's all just in this process. And so we've built this little exploratory prototype that, like, this is pretty darn amazing because it embeds all the learning in what you're doing.
Yep.
Rather than, like, I got to go to a Canvas course or I got to meet with someone. And it's like, well, okay, great. But then how do you scale that across the 450 programs that we need to have these learning assessment plans for?
Right.
And it's just, those are so fun. And seeing the response when we just show it to people is just like, oh, that just makes total sense. That's cool. Great. And then at the end, I have something I can print out, I can copy and paste, and I can put in my proposal. Great. Yep. And it follows best practices. And then on the back end, we have all the really great data that we can show across the institution what's going on. And it's just, and do it sort of in a really passive way that really people don't mind doing.
So I want to ask this question, and this will be like penultimate. So like because I think we'll get to the question we ask everybody in a moment. What you just said, I'd love your thinking on, because what you just described, a couple of projects, and the last one especially, where do you think most of the resistance comes from with folks who don't want to leverage technology in the ways that, in fact, because as I hear you describe it, it's almost like, well, why wouldn't you want to engage in this way, right? Because if the outcome needs to be refined kind of assessment plans for accreditation in any number of ways, but more important than that, our ability to communicate to students that this is what you should expect from having had this course or having had this program of study. What do you think what do you think the root cause of the hesitancy is? And there may be a couple of those.
Yeah, I mean, there are legitimate concerns when you start putting any of this data together in a central repository and can leverage that.
Yeah.
I mean, there are security issues,
Sure.
there are privacy issues, there are a variety of ways that you can use that data for non-benevolent ways. And so I think people have been burned in some cases by that, and very rightfully so apprehensive about giving more and more information and having it managed by a set of digital tools that may or may not be acting in our best interest. So I think that's one.
Yeah.
I think there's another that, if something is difficult to understand, it's often seen as a little suspect. And in many of these cases, how AI data is trained, how these large language models have worked, how they work, it's for many a very black box sort of thing where we're just like, I don't get it. It doesn't sound right. I've heard stories of bias, and there is.
Sure.
I mean, all these criticisms are legitimate, but again, without a deep understanding of this, it's really difficult to dig in and see what's fact or fiction.
Yeah.
And so we just sort of like, I just want to avoid it. And then, in higher education, we've just resisted leveraging technology to understand what we do internally for a long time. There are many institutions that do it really well, but for the most part, we just really haven't looked at our own internal processes and tried to figure out how to optimize those. There hasn't been the external or internal pressures up until, more recently that have really required us to think about different things. So as a result of that, people are just a little bit hesitant. Like, this is new. I don't like this. How is this going to be wielded against me, or what it's going to do? So
Yeah.
I think those fears come from that.
That's fair enough. Well, Jim, ready yourself. The question that we ask everybody at the close, and it will move with us in just a second. And as we get to it, let me just say this. I think having worked with you, I'm really eager to hear a response. How do we create the kind of lasting transformative change that, be it through technology, be it through teaching and learning or pedagogy, be it through any number of things, from things that you've seen, things that you've led, things that you've experienced. How do we create the kind of lasting transformative change that people seem to want, to need, to desire? The public certainly seems to be hoping for it, saying students, parents, stakeholders, others. And how do we do it together?
Wow. I love the reveal. That was cool.
Yeah.
I was like, what is this question? And then
Yeah.
the sound. I think number one, we have to listen. We do not a very good job sometimes not listening. Having a direction, we go through performative actions that, don't inform us, and we just have an agenda. And I think that humans read through that, and we just need to listen a little bit and acknowledge. And I think most people understand that it may or may not go their way, but listening is a good skill. I think we're here because of students. And I think more often than not, because our careers, let's say as a researcher and as an administrator, are centered on our work, then we believe that that's the entirety of the universe. And therefore, every decision should be made to make my life better. Yeah, there's a natural inclination to do that because we're all energy-preserving creatures that want to, save our energy. But it is really about the transference of knowledge to a student, whether that's through research, mentorship, or something else, or teaching. That's this work. And I think oftentimes we forget that. And if we focused on that part of it, I think a lot of the activities would sort of align.
Yeah.
And we would naturally do that together because we all have that particular goal. And then I think we just need to have, especially as we are experiencing significant amounts of change, we just need to have a lot of grace and support and willingness to delay and sort of let things emerge because of the stress and struggle that so many people are experiencing.
Yeah.
And just like, oh, okay, well, we thought we were going that direction. Maybe we're going to go over there for a little bit, put it on pause. And, these systems have been in place for a really long time. The world is not going to end if something doesn't happen by tomorrow. No one's going to get hurt, we hope. They might be slightly frustrated that their registration system isn't quite speedy enough or whatever. But sort of being willing to recognize and hear from those individuals and sort of being willing to, just move and flow a little bit more like water rather than, like a battering ram.
Jim, there is, I don't know of a conversation, even if it's a quick one, in the hallway, that I don't walk away grateful for having run into you.
Well, thanks again. I'm coming here next week and have more of this. So it's great. No, pleasure to chat and yeah.
I'm grateful.
Yeah,
I'm grateful for your work at this university, and really all the just amazing things that you're leading, that you're a part of, that you are helping us tackle and think through among like just teams of people.
Yeah, and I would just say, we're all, it's a much broader team, and it's all the environment that we all exist in and support each other. This stuff isn't done one individual, two individuals.
Yeah.
It's maybe pushed forward or nudged in certain ways, but it is all just a huge team activity that we all contribute. And so appreciative of all your work and advocacy for this type of work.
Well, I know this. It doesn't get very far without really great people, really great thinkers, really great just human beings who are willing to listen, who are willing to press pause, as you suggest, for a minute to say, let's think through that one a little bit more, and then we can go. So I'm grateful, Jim. Thanks for all that you do and for being willing to sit down with us today. Viewers, listeners, this has been Together. Join us next time.